Hello and welcome to another episode of On the Payroll, my podcast where I talk to my guests about fascinating topics such as leadership, project management, Salesforce, consulting, delivering great projects with great people. And in today's episode, I get to speak with one of my most favorite project managers. His name is Giannini, and we work together at Capgemini, where he has been for quite a while. So we had a long conversation about project management, about things that can go wrong in a project and how to approach those situations and how to manage great teams. I hope that you will enjoy this because I really did. Thanks a lot. Good morning, John. Welcome to my podcast. It's called On the Payroll. How are you today?
Very well, thanks, Pei. Thank you very much.
We have worked together. Not quite worked together. We have worked in the same company and we moved around the same circles at Cap. And so I know you as this font of all knowledge. Whenever I hit a road bump, John's the one that I go to. But before we kind of get there, I know your journey to your role at CAP was a very long and very interesting one. So I would love to hear you tell your story. Start wherever you want. I know where you're going to start. I'd love to hear you tell your story.
Okay. So I'll give you a pocket summary of a fairly convoluted route that led me into IT. And it started back in 1980. So I actually started work as an apprentice gas fitter for British Gas at a time when it was nationalised. And I did my apprenticeship, which was 3 years. So I can fit central heating boilers and gas cookers and fires and do all that sort of stuff. And did that, qualified, and then did that for an additional 2 years. So my first 5 years of working life were as a service engineer for British Gas. I actually had hair in those days as well, bizarrely. And at the end of those 5 years, I got opportunity to go and work for, they called it industrial and commercial sales, which was moving out of the domestic market, which I worked in, into a pure sales role in commercial premises. So it could be anything from a factory burning millions and millions of cubic meters of gas to a little office shop that might want a gas supply or a meter or a boiler or a heater or anything. And I did that for 5 years, but it wasn't really very satisfying. We went through the privatisation and it became very much of a hard sell job. And as I said to you, prior to us starting the call properly, it made me realise I didn't really want to be a salesman. And they were advertising internally for business analysts within British Gas's own IT department over in Croydon in South East London. And so I applied for it. And I guess because of my business experience, 10 years in the company by then, I actually got a job as a trainee business analyst. Now that was at the time of green screens and Kix COBOL DB2, for those that are old enough to remember those things. But my role was as an analyst, and it was my business experience rather than my technical skills that they wanted. So that's how I got into IT. As I started in the first place, working in Croydon. And the last thing that I got involved with at British Gas was they decided to outsource the whole of British Gas's IT department, and we had to do an evaluation of various potential outsourcing partners. And one of those outsourcing partners was Hoskins. And there was IBM, I think it was. And a couple, CSC was another one. And I was part of the evaluation team. So we wrote the RFP assessment questions. We then met the various companies and we did all the evaluations and made the decision, basically. And at the end of that process, it was clear that Hoskins at that time was a country mile ahead of the others. The other companies only wanted really to take on the work, get rid of the existing staff, whereas Hoskins actually had a real passion for keeping the people on. So I was part of that bid team. I got introduced to Hoskins, and rather than wait to be pushed basically into a role in IT that into an area really that other British Gas I didn't know anything about, I actually jumped in and joined Hoskins there and then as a business analyst, and that was it. So I started off as business analyst. I did a couple of projects early on. That was probably, what was that? 90, 92, something like that, 91. And after doing a certain amount of work as Hoskins as an analyst, that I was working on an automotive project, and they offered me the opportunity to do PMO. And then after that, they said, "Do you fancy taking on the role as a project manager?" And at that point in time, I thought, well, I don't know whether I want to be a project manager. I still haven't got the technical skills, if you like, to do coding and all those sorts of things. But it seemed reasonable to give it a go. So I said, yeah, okay. And at that time, that was a Microsoft project. So it's nothing to do with Salesforce, which is where I ended up. And I had a go. And so that's how I started my project management career. It was a completely different technologies. And I started from not knowing anything other than doing a few training courses. And that was the start of my project management career, really, at that point. During that period, Hoskins was taken over by Capgemini, and it's been Capgemini ever since. So, and I ended up doing 26 years at Capgemini. So it was a long period. If we talk specifically about my transition from various technologies, because I was technology agnostic, to Salesforce. So I actually was doing a purchasing upgrade project for Ministry of Defence with a colleague of mine at the time, and he said to me, he was actually the salesman on the project, and he said to me, "I found this new technology called Salesforce." He said, "And I'm talking to the management at CAP and to set up a business unit or a team, would you come on and be my ops manager and project manager for it?" So I said, "Yeah, fair enough, I'll give it a go." And that was Salesforce. And so I ran our first Salesforce project, which was a small project, and just I think there was 2 or 3 of us in the team, and that went on to then bigger ones from there and then thereafter. So that was the start of it. So that was a long time ago. I mean, that was 2007, 2008. So there was no service, there was no clouds, there was just Salesforce, and we actually worked really closely with Salesforce at the time. We were placing our resources into the Salesforce team to work with them to learn how to implement Salesforce. It was that early on. And then on and off, I've been working with Salesforce, projects within CAP pretty much on and off all the time. And then about 8-10 years ago, I became full-time in the Salesforce practice as a senior project manager. And I've been doing Salesforce projects ever since, really. So until I decided I had the opportunity to stop. So various different stuff, I'd implemented UK, Europe, and around the world, done some really interesting stuff, met some really interesting people. And that's how I ended up getting into it. So a bit of a bizarre one, really.
Really? I mean, the way you tell it, it sounds really natural that it was just a series of acquisitions that you got to where you were. So did you say 26 years? 26
years at CAP, yeah. I did 5 years at British Gas in their IT department, 10 years prior to that. But yeah, so 26 years in CAP, yeah. So
I've not heard the story. So you were there right at the beginning then, setting up the business unit.
Yeah, so Salesforce started, I say, around about 2008. And I was one of the original founding members. Callum Murray had the idea, who's long gone now, and I was one of the founding members, if you like.
Right.
Yeah, long time ago.
Hadn't realised that you've been, solely in the Salesforce space. Okay, so so that's interesting because this is a while ago, but you actually set up the business unit. What did you think, oh, that's an interesting thing to do? We chatted about earlier on about this role that came across my lap, which was around delivering for a small partner. I would imagine it'd be about the same thing. So the thinking of, let's set up a business unit within CAP, which is quite a large company. What did that involve? Was it a very informal, hey, I've got an idea, I think we should do this because Salesforce is going to be the next big thing? Or did you have to kind of put together a plan of growth, and what was that like?
So to be fair, so Callum came up with the idea, and he sold that to Capgemini Management, and he was responsible for presenting and developing the business plans and the approach. It was him who established the first relationship with Salesforce as well. So my role was supporting that. So I helped him in the background with the development of the business plans, putting together the generic plans about how we might implement service offerings, but more focused on how we got the team set up, getting the team trained, getting them onto projects. And so it was more, my role was more of an operations role. So it wasn't so much around driving the business. It wasn't a business unit at that stage. It was just a team. But I was more focused on, okay, how do we deliver the projects? Working with Callum on proposals, and then what do we do with the team? Who, do we know who we've got? Where are they? What skills have they got all those sorts of things. So that tended to be more of my, and also a little bit of the project management itself once we won some work, of course. So that's where I was more involved with the operational side of things, looking after the guys on the ground, developing the relationships with the customers.
So if one were to look at, your career at CAP, so my next question is, what kept you there? What made it interesting enough for you to think, I am happy here, and there's no need to look out?
I think, and I've got no external reference points outside CAP, but there's by and large, everyone I met were nice people, decent people. There was a friendliness and approachability that there wasn't really any hierarchy, or there's not that impression of hierarchy. So if I wanted to go and talk to one of the senior people, if I had a question, I could approach them, and I think that kept me in CAP was the fact that there were a lot of nice people in there. It made that part of it easy, and also the work. I mean, if I look back at what I've been able to do, I've worked abroad in many countries. I was traveling out to Germany 1 day a week at one point for one project. That was a time when that company was paying for us to fly business class. That was fantastic. I was going out once a week. I'd be in Heathrow by 5:30 on the first flight and come back at 8:30 late in the evening. But it was just a fantastic experience. And I've had a lot of interesting things along the way, and lots of interesting customers as well. I mean, the variety of work that I've been involved with, it's just been a great experience in that regard. It's not been easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think, as a general rule, it was a great set of experiences. I wouldn't have had that if I'd stayed where I was prior to joining CAP. So to a degree, you could argue it might have been chance that I made the decision to jump, but I wouldn't have gained what I had. The world would have been a lot smaller if I'd stayed where I was.
Talking about interesting projects, what's the most interesting project that you've come across?
The most interesting, you're talking specifically about Salesforce projects, obviously.
No. In general, you can talk about projects in general.
So in terms of just general experience, in all the time I've been at CAP, one of the ones I enjoyed the most was working for the MOD, because it was working closely with all of the departments of the MOD, both Navy, Air Force, and the military, and that was a fantastic experience, purely from a personal interest perspective. If I look at actual really interesting projects that I've done, some of the work I did for Centrica, or we did with Salesforce and Centrica. When I look back at it now, at the time, it was probably only started with around the second or the third Salesforce big project we'd done. And when I look back at it now, and some of the software like FSL that's in Salesforce now, we were building Click software, which is the basis of FSL and the Gantt charts, by ourselves with the help of Salesforce on the ground, way before any of that was developed. So to develop that, and over 3 phases, we did a huge call centre up in Stratford-upon-Avon, and then we did a second phase integrating it with a laptop so the salesman could take it into customers and build their central heating systems and their quotes on site, print it all out and get them to sign it up. And then we also, at the end of that, when they pushed the button to sign it up, we did all the background software that then allowed them to actually plan all the different skills, the electricians and the plumbers, all in the right sequence to go in and do the implementation. So when I look back at that, that was so advanced in terms of what we were doing relative to where the market was in Salesforce. And we, that was a great piece of one. Plus, obviously, it was almost to a point like going home, because I'd worked at Centrica for years. And then so I was going back into a world, albeit in a different part of England, but into a world I knew. So that was good. And that was a special team from a CAP perspective as well. And I'm rattling on a bit now, but the other thing that was really interesting about it was that normally you would do all your own system testing, but certainly in the second and the third phases, I think it was the second phase, we actually agreed with the customer that we would get end users to do the system testing. And it was a real challenge, because obviously they had to be educated on what level of bugs was acceptable. And to move away from that, it's a bug, it's a problem, to it's a bug, but that's your job to test it and find those bugs. Now, so don't worry about it. That's actually what you're there to do, So it was a great experience. So that was a special project. I've done a couple of others a bit later on. I mean, another one that was particularly good was we implemented, I think it was, if not the first, one of the first major FSL implementations for anywhere in the world. And we actually, although we developed it in the UK for a UK company, the first implementation was in Melbourne, in Australia. And I learned some painful lessons there, because I had to be in the UK at the time, and trying to actually manage a 24-hour implementation from the UK is extremely difficult. It was a real opener. It's partly my ignorance, to be fair, but it was it was good.
How long was that project for?
I think this was a third phase of work. So the original phase had just been an implementation of basic CRM into UK, Ireland, and I think it was Sweden and Norway or something like that. And then we had a separate team that was doing CPQ. And then when the bit that I'd been doing with the CRM had finished, we then moved into doing the FSL. And the FSL piece was partly based in the US, partly in the UK, in Scotland, and so we went live in the first country in Australia. So that was great. I mean, we got a trip out to see the guys in the US. That was quite a great experience. Working with these remote teams is good fun. Very interesting.
I'm trying to imagine how long you went with disrupted sleep patterns, because obviously you couldn't.
I did 2 weeks in particular when we were going live, and in my ignorance at the time, I thought we could run 2 project managers 50-50, and I did at least 2 days of 36 hours. And it's funny going back and looking at your emails that you sent at the end of your session, and I go back the next day and look at them, and they didn't make any sense at all. They were incomprehensible a lot of the time. I might as well have been heavily drinking, because it's just complete rubbish. But that's a fantastic lesson, because we had development team in the US with the UK team supporting the UK, plus the India team, plus the guys on the ground in Australia, and you really need at least three groups to cover the whole time zone. So it was a fantastic lesson to learn. Great experience if ever I was faced with that again. So,
what other projects come to mind where it was filled with lots of learning that you can share?
I think most of them were really. A lot of them for different reasons, but I think the major ones that I did that I learned the most from, they tended to be one or more phase. So like Centrica was the best part of, I think, 3 years. the other one I was just talking about with the FSL implementation, that was certainly 2 years, and they present different challenges, both in terms of dealing with your own teams and dealing with the customer teams, particularly remotely. But I also found another one that I did was for a major postal customer, and that was a great project. It was difficult. It was really difficult because you've got the challenges of a huge, was still suffering, I think, from a nationalisation or sort of mentality. But it gave me the opportunity of actually going out and meeting our team in India, and that completely transformed my rather ignorant and naive sort of view of the teams that we had out there. And although in a world we live in today where it's, like now it's all Zoom, excuse me, and remote working, because we have to, I'm a bit old school in that I believe that face-to-face working is still, you can't replicate that remotely. Yourself sitting there in front of that laptop, you've probably got stuff, get in the background there. I've got a second screen here where I am. I'm not looking at it, but I have got one. And so you building up those relationships, particularly where they're delivering stuff for you, that excuse me just a second, sorry. That development trust. I'm going to die on this call. Sorry, I hope you can cut that out. But that developing that development trust and actually understanding. I'd be on conference calls with them like this, joking, and the UK sense of humour is slightly different to other parts of the world. And but meeting them face to face, you can see that realization. These guys, he's a nice guy. He's worth working with, and I think those sorts of things are incredibly important, really. And I wouldn't have got those if I hadn't had that particular project and that opportunity to go and meet our team. And it's completely changed my attitude and the way I think about the teams we're working with. They deserve a lot of time and care, the remote teams, that they don't always get. And they work incredible hours and they work very hard, and it can be forgotten about sometimes.
I think I agree with you there that everyone, especially in the UK or anywhere else, should go out and visit their offshore team, because that really makes such a difference. And so you're talking about humor, and I used to remember that coming to England, I came in 99. It took me a while to understand that not everything that's said is serious. So the British have got very dry sense of humor, very droll. Sometimes there's a tinge of sarcasm in there, and it took me a while to understand that. And I think when we're on a call, specific, before COVID, for example, when we had calls with remote teams, the video isn't generally on, which is what I found out, and you can't tell if they've understood. So I was running this project where we were with a customer, and from the UK, we'd have a conversation about whatever topic. And then when we debrief on the call, they'd say that they understood. But so I got invited over for a wedding, and I worked out of there, and I would have the same meeting, but sitting on that side. And I realized that there was lots of cues that were missed. And it was only when I was able to sit with them and talk to them and see their reactions, that I realized that there were missed cues that could have led to miscommunication. And there was also the really lovely people, and there's also this deep desire to not mess up. That creates behavior that if we don't create a safe space for them, it exacerbates situation, because they don't want to tell you that they're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not just cues with your own team. I mentioned I was up in Scotland working on a project, And as a project manager, I coming in cold, I thought it was essential that when you're doing at that particular time on that particular project, I felt that it was absolutely essential that at least to start with, we were doing the weekly progress reports and reviews face to face, because that to me conveys, she can look into my eyes or and see I'm telling the truth or I'm not, as the case may be, and I'm committed enough to be there on a Friday to go through this stuff, and I think it stood us in good stead. Rather than saying, well, I'm going to go now because I need to, it's a flight home or whatever. So, and I do think that sometimes can be lost. I mean, a great example, we were working with a customer team who it was actually EDS was the other third party for another customer. And we'd been arguing about an interface specification for weeks. It wasn't a Salesforce project, it was way pre-Salesforce. And we argued backwards and forwards, and in the end, they were coming over anyway. And we sat down, and within 20 minutes, we agreed. Now I know that was pre-Zoom and all those things, so the problems wouldn't be as exacerbated. But it was a simple case where face-to-face completely changed the conversation, and we solved it. And it does make a difference. There's some fantastic tools now. I mean, some of the more recent projects we've worked on make working online so much better and more professional, marvellous things. But I still like to see someone face to face occasionally. I think it makes a difference.
I totally agree. And I think there's some magic about being in proximity with somebody else, sitting next to them, listening to them, tell off their child about whatever they've done and just absorbing the energy, I think.
Yeah. And it's not just the customer, it's the team as well. You need to spend, as a project manager, I don't think our job's not just having a plan and ticking the boxes when the things and updating your risk register. There's so much interpersonal stuff that is easy to forget or miss sometimes, and that can make all the difference.
100%. I am totally on board with that. Okay, this is slightly, feel free to. What's the biggest mistake you've ever done that cost a lot, that,
Cost a lot? Cost a lot.
Interpret it however you like, whether personally or, to the project or to the client or, from a PR point of view. Something big that you think, this is a big mistake. If I could turn back time, I wouldn't erase it because of the lessons I got, but it was, pretty painful to move through.
I'll give you a tongue-in-cheek example as a starting point. And funny enough, this all goes back to Centrica. They stick in my mind, I guess. I'd been working with the customer's project manager for weeks, and we had a wonderful project plan on the MSP. It might have even been P&W then, I don't know. And I'd gone through it religiously with him every week. We would go through it together and check the tasks, and because we were quite well organised there, and we were months in, and then just out of the blue, I was going through it one day, and I went, "Look, there's a dependency link missing here," and I pulled this dependency link between the two things, and it was on auto schedule, and the whole project went out a month. Now we had a team of must have been 15 odd people there. So you can imagine the impact, not only on the timelines, on the costs. And so that was a bit of an awkward one, if I'm honest. So it's a lesson learned, isn't it, really? I suppose if I think about other projects, I can't think of specific things that leap out. I know we had problems, the comms, because of the distances I mentioned about the Australia trip. That was it. That one, it would probably I'd beg a bit of time to think about that, to be honest with you. But most projects have difficult points in them in terms of progress. And I've actually said to customers before, there will be points where we will clash or, clash heads because there'll be something that doesn't go quite according to what we plan, and we will have to try and resolve it. So, but that's why we're here, and we'll work it through, And I think it's a natural thing for all projects because, and it's a well-known old adage, isn't it? Plans only as good as the day you write it, and then it's out the window, and that's true. So it doesn't matter how carefully you try to work something out, there's always a challenge or something that comes up that's not expected, or you miss something. I can think of one example where I should have actually stepped back, and this was a painful lesson, and this was simply that we went into a project with quite a clear definition of scope, but with a customer who was new to Agile, new to the development processes full stop, and new to the technology as well. And it was clear when we first got in there that they were going to need a certain amount of education and help. And also they didn't actually know what they wanted. And as a project manager at that point, I should have actually said, stop, let's reassess what you need to do completely, and then rework out what's going to take to deliver it. And what we tried to do was the right thing for the customer and keep it going and help them and educate them and change it as we went along. And it probably caused a lot more, I'm sure it caused a lot more pain and a lot more confusion in the long run than if we'd have just come out and said, and I consider that a lesson for me insofar as I should have been much more upfront about that rather than doing what I thought was the right thing. I think in the back of my mind, I knew that perhaps it probably wasn't going to be the best thing. So, but it's a lesson learned. Another lesson.
So that kind of leads me to my next question, which so you're talking about this little voice in your head. Have you found it to be right most of the time or all the time? Has it ever steered you wrong?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, I've always tried to be true to myself in what I think are my strengths, my assets. I'm not necessarily the most in the detail of the weeds, planning, ticking the boxes sort of project manager. I've always felt that personal relationships and those sorts of things, the interpersonal things, are the things that make a project work and successful, because you're always going to have problems. And if you've got the right sort of relationship, it means that resolving those problems can be less painful. But then that demands a certain amount of honesty in terms of when you're delivering messages to the customers, which, it isn't always easy to do. Sometimes, it's not easy to break bad news. And I'm not saying that I've always been good at doing that, but I do think it makes a difference. And so that's always been my focus. I've tried to be honest as much as I can and straightforward and be open about what we're doing and make it's not all doom and gloom. It's fun as well, so take the mickey and joke and laugh as much as anyone who knows me will know. But but that's I think in that regard, I think the voice in my head has been quite good. I think I've tried to be true to what I feel is the right way of doing things as much as I can. It's not always been the easiest thing, but that's what goes.
So if someone were to come up and say, kind of brand new, and asks you, what do you think a project manager is there to do apart from the deliver to time, budget, and thing? What do you think a good project manager is there to do, and what are the key differentiators that highlight a great project manager from just a mediocre one?
So I think that I suppose you've got to be reasonably organised and quite clear thinking. I do believe you have to be prepared to make a decision if you have to. And what do I mean by that? So as I've said at the beginning of the interview, I'm technology agnostic. I have to rely on the subject matter experts in terms of the technical delivery and what we do in that regard. And I think that's been an advantage. I know you get a lot of technical stroke project managers who can do a certain amount of the technical work as well. But I think that actually can influence how you actually do things when you might not necessarily do it the right way. So I've had to learn to rely on people, and also, sniff that bit of when they're trying to blow smoke. But so, getting back to your question, then, so I think that having a reasonably clear view of what you need to do is good. So the ability to plan and to organise is a great thing. I think it's really important that you can talk to people in a relaxed way that encourages confidence, that you are as honest as you're able to be, so that they understand that. But you have to have an empathy. So you have to be realistic about, what you're trying to do. I've never felt that demanding from your team is the right way to get the best out of the team. I've always prided myself that the guys that work for me, guys and girls, I mean, when I say that, irrespective of country or anything else, they work for me because they wanted to work for me, because they wanted to do a good job for me. And to that extent, I think you have to look out for them to a certain degree to protect them. Now, that's not to say that you should mother them or mollycoddle them or whatever. There are still times when you have to have hard conversations. I've taken people off projects if I've had to, but I do think that you miss an opportunity sometimes if you don't have the team working with you rather than in spite of you. So there's, and the same approach pretty much comes for both the team internally and the customer. So a degree of honesty, and taking them with you, so that when you do hit a challenge, they know that you're trying to do the best you can, whether that be that you're a resource short from a team perspective, or that you're a week behind from a customer perspective. It doesn't matter. So I feel that in a lot of instances and examples I see, I think that particular set of skills isn't necessarily recognised as much as it should be. Now, I know a lot of project managers that are like that, but I know a lot of project managers that necessarily aren't. And I understand that there's a balance, because it's a commercial, operation when we're working from consultancies and the likes. So you've got a commercial responsibility and all the rest of it. But sometimes I think that people want tick box tickers, when actually that's not necessarily what's the best. That's only my opinion.
It's a very valuable opinion. So if you were to look around at the project managers that's running Salesforce project or any other software delivery project from a consulting point of view, what are the common mistakes you've seen project managers make that you think, if all the PMs just knew this one tip, there's one tip.
If I knew that, I could make a fortune. I wish I knew. I honestly don't know if it's as easy as that. I think communication's at the hub of it all, really. I don't think it's technical understanding. I think it is. I think comms is the biggest thing. And when I say comms, I mean not just sending an email and wait for a response. I mean, pick up the phone, get on a Zoom call, go and see them and say, okay, what's the problem? What we're doing about this? And so I think that's our biggest advantage if we can get to use it. Biggest strength, if you like. But yeah, I guess that would be at the heart of it, if I'm honest.
How about leadership styles, for example?
Yeah. So again, I think my leadership style is quite collaborative. I think it's seen me reasonably successful. It's enabled me to be very approachable, and from me through CAP is that. Mind you, it's partly because I was there so long, so I'm the only one who knew the background to it. But I'll try and help anyone with any experience. So in terms of leadership styles, I think that being good at the technical things and being organised is an asset. And I think that I had that to a certain extent. Obviously, I didn't have the technical. I wish I had more technical skill, particularly in relation to Salesforce, than I have, if I'm honest. I think that just to ease my understanding of the products and the way it would have helped. I mean, I've got a reasonably good rudimentary understanding, but had I been starting again, rather than doing an apprenticeship in gas fitting, if I'd have started off with a technical qualification, I did a degree, that would have been a great asset. And then after that, then I think the leadership style is all about empathy and about, bringing people on, getting the right opinions. And I don't mean acres and acres of debates about what we're going to do. Is this good, is this bad? It's, okay, what are our options? And the experts say, well, it's this, this, and this. And okay, based on that, what you told me, it's that one. Now let's get on with it. So it's that ability to be empathetic and listen, but at the same time be willing to make the decisions and get on with it and stand by your decisions. If you say that this is the way we want to go, I'm quite happy to say I've had to make that decision because we haven't got the time, and this is why I justify it if anyone questions it. Not, to be fair, not that anyone ever has, but that's my perspective on it.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
I'm rambling a bit.
No. They're all good stuff. And I was just thinking that I want to be mindful of your time because I know you've got to do your car.
Yeah, I've got an MOT to do. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've got 30, 40 minutes if you need it. If you want to keep going, or it's up to you.
I've got another podcast to record straight after you. So,
sorry?
But I just wanted to thank you very much for making the time for me, and it's so good to catch up. And there are some questions that I didn't get around to ask. So maybe at some point there's a part 2.
Yeah, if you think it's worthwhile, then I'll be delighted.
Okay, so anyway, thank you again, John. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.